Welcome into the Tuesday edition, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Paul Kuharski, and for the next 3 days for Joe Rexrode. Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning as well. Hope everybody's off to a fantastic start to their day. PK, welcome in. What's going on?
What a fall break this is to get up at this hour because Mr. Rexrode is snoring and keeping his family awake. Drinking pina coladas and doing the thing. I mean, Joe really lives the life for a guy in season.
He really does.
Wasn't at the Vanderbilt game, if I'm correct.
You're correct.
Failing miserably at his job, where you have to anticipate results and things like that. And he didn't. Our guest later, Gentry Estes, did.
He did.
So beating Joe to hell there in the competitive world of covering college football.
I mean, you're right.
So really, I mean, it's good that Joe's not here because we get Gentry.
That is true. The college football writer for The Athletic. Now, one of several, but middle of October, just takes off, just goes, just out of here.
I mean, it's a rule, really, in the football world, pro, college, whatever. You just don't take off during the season. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Maybe if you have a bye week, this was a bad bye week, by the way. You can't have a Monday night. This should be outlawed. A Monday night game going into your bye week is really not good. And then Williamson County Schools fails again. I mean, if you're going to put fall break right next to the bye week, you might as well overlap. That would have been a major win. But it didn't work out that way, and Joe just ignores it. Joe ignores it. He writes these little capsules, that pretend like, well, I was nearby, Vandy.
Joe, we need you on the field.
I looked in on Vandy.
We need you on the field.
I heard some quotes.
Where are you? Where are you, Joe? Slide from the beach, man. It's all good. From the beach.
Why are they compelled? I'm going to dive right in. What's the urge to throw away the goalpost?
That's a good question.
I get the parading it down Broadway, and I get that there's a river at the end of Broadway, and you're probably exhausted. You want to put the thing down.
Sure.
And I know they did it at UT, but the stadium
that's a hall, man.
In Knoxville happens to be right near the river.
It does.
So that was like a one-off to me. Now, I was at Columbia. I know people are saying, you got to connect to Columbia. But we broke a 44-game losing streak. And I wasn't there, but the goalposts were paraded downtown.
Yes.
Nearly 200 blocks, brought to campus. And the field there, and I know these things happen organically, was to bring, this was just a single goalpost.
Yep.
It was brought to the football fraternity.
Okay.
And then people pilgrimaged throughout the rest of the day to the football fraternity to see the goalpost. I don't know what happened to it from there. I imagine it was cut up, but I don't understand the urge to dispose of the
See you later.
Is that like, do you think there's a feeling of like, it was cursed and we broke the curse? Let's dispose of it?
It's a good question.
Because then it's fished out by authorities.
That's the thing. Like, it wasn't left in the river. So like it ends up in the river. And now where does it go after that? What do the authorities do with it?
My understanding is it's, I think it's been brought back to campus. It's being cut up and it's being auctioned off, which is a great fundraiser thing.
Sure.
I mean, if I'm a Vanderbilt fan and I could have a foot of that in my, home memorabilia area, that would be a number one piece of memorabilia.
Yes, no doubt about it.
And now I understand the kids aren't thinking about that. And I understand wanting to parade it down Broadway, which is like the place to show it off. I just don't understand I don't understand the extinguishing of it. I would want to plant it in the yard of the football frat.
And just leave it there. Yeah. I
mean,
also,
a sculpture.
That's a heck of a haul too. Like from West
that's
End
impressive.
to the Cumberland River. That's a long haul.
That's impressive. And look, the fine and all of that, you got to have some perspective on when to waive these things. I mean, I understand the rules are the rules and there's safety and all of that for storming the field. I understand Kevin Ingram anti-storming the field because he's been trampled at a basketball game and all of that. I do think tighter quarters make it a little bit more complicated.
Agreed.
But you can't prevent that scene.
No.
And I think Vanderbilt happily pays that, and Arkansas happily pays that.
Yeah, like I'm cool with it as long as it doesn't turn into like, just some every week thing. Like, if Vanderbilt goes and takes down, I'm trying to look at on their home schedule because if they take down Texas, they'll probably do it again. But if they take down South Carolina or whoever it is, like, don't be swarming the field over that. So as long as it doesn't turn into that where you're doing it all the time, I'm cool with it. But yeah, like the other night, that's part of it. Like I think you happily pay the fine and move on.
Has Saban said anything? Because
Not that I've seen.
It doesn't make it a hard place to play, like atmospherically.
Correct.
It was a hard place to play because they were very good football was played against them.
They were.
I think it's great that Vandy played that thing on a loop. I'd like to hear Saban respond to it.
I would too.
I think if you're a cool media guy, you record a minute and a half and get it on social media right away and play into it. You can't say that stuff on College Game Day and know that it's playing on a loop and then not say anything about it until next Saturday.
Yes.
Or maybe not at all. I think you gotta dive all the way in if you're going to be part of it that way. So I'm disappointed he hasn't said anything. But look, that's an all-time great sports day in Nashville.
It really is.
It ranks with the Music City Miracle, right? What else? It's up there with all the
Music
best.
City Miracle, Game 6 for the Preds when they punched their ticket to the Cup final was pretty similar. Like it was, when you really think about it, we really just haven't had a ton of days like that, right? Like a lot of what the Titans, the Titans punching their ticket to the Super Bowl was great. That was in Jacksonville.
Right.
So it was different. So we've not really had, and I don't know if you know this, I'm sure you do. Home playoff games for the Titans haven't gone particularly well lately.
Yeah.
So there's not been a ton to really point to, though. It's interesting you bring up the Saban stuff. Clark Lee was on with Jared yesterday and was asked about that. It gave a pretty interesting response. Here's what Clark Lee had to say.
So again, you're not going to believe me, but I'm going to tell you. And I don't think people understand that I am so insulated. I didn't know about those comments until I was asked about them in the post-game press conference.
Oh, come on.
Listen, God is my witness. Now, listen, I did know about the rat traps because they had asked me about that. They had put rat traps in the building or whatever it was. Sure. They had brought that up in my presser on Tuesday. I'll say this. I mean, sure, like, and I'm going to be real with you because, like that's what you expect from me. It does piss me off because this is my place, man. Like again, I didn't hear about it before. I certainly would have put that in front of the team had I certainly would have brought that to everyone's attention. And I'm sure they all saw it. The team did.
So that was Clark Lee yesterday talking about how those comments from Saban, once he did hear them, pissed him off a little bit.
Yeah, Clark's right-hand man failed him by not giving him that. I mean, knowing how I don't like it, but how that stuff serves as fodder for everybody. The fact of the matter is he's not wrong. It's not a hard place to play in terms of environment.
Right.
It's never been a hard place to play in terms of environment. And I don't know what the numbers were, but I'm sure it was
heavily Alabama.
70, 80% Alabama. What made it a hard place to play and how it has to work is it has to be a hard place to play based on how you play football. And this was the beauty of this was not some fluke. They did not, run some trick play. They did not hurt the quarterback and force them into a set. They beat them start to finish in a full quality, all out SEC game. They beat a team that just beat Georgia and looked, they let Georgia back in it, but they played phenomenally good football a week earlier. They came here and they got beat.
They did.
Straight out beat.
It was awesome. I mean, I continue, they're all making the rounds yesterday. Good for them. Like if I'm Vanderbilt, I'm leaning into this. It's the biggest moment by far in the history of your football program. They were everywhere yesterday. So good for them leaning into it. I still, Diego Pavia kid at quarterback. I don't know. Like, I have no idea what he could be at the NFL level or any of that and what it's going to mean the rest of the year. That guy is an absolute dog. Like it's fun to watch that guy play football, and I'm interested to see what he does the rest of the year. But he was unbelievable on Saturday.
And as someone that's not paying a lot of attention to Vanderbilt by any means, to see that a school that you presume is losing in the transfer portal saw and went and got a coach from New Mexico State who brought people with him.
Yep.
Who transformed the program at least for a day. It's a shame that Georgia State happened. It's a shame that Missouri happened. You can't play the what if game. But I know Vandy fans probably basking in this are also thinking, man, we're so close to being 5-0, and if we were 5-0, we'd be top 12.
Yeah, for sure. They really would be. Like you beat Alabama, Missouri, and look, Missouri I think is an absolute fraud, and Vanderbilt should have had that game won, but they would be 5-0 right now, and we'd be talking about, like, does Vanderbilt have a path to the college football playoff? That'd be the conversation we'd be having right now. It's incredible to think about.
Insane. But now they need to sustain the attention with their play, and they can't have the letdown that Alabama just had.
Yes.
That would be what everybody expects, right?
No doubt. And look, this Kentucky team that they're playing Saturday has got a really good defense. I'm still not sold on their offense, but they got a really good defense, and I'm interested to see how Clarkley and those guys respond coming up on Saturday to the biggest moment in program history.
I've got a great Jim Wyatt story. Jim Wyatt, our good friend who works for the Titans, writing about the Titans, is the biggest Vanderbilt fan virtually anybody knows.
Yes.
He's endured all of it. And he and his dad and his brother go way, way back. I'll share this story. I had a conversation with him last week about something Vandy related.
Okay.
And he picked up the conversation after this game.
I look forward to that. We'll get into that coming up next. We will also take a look around the National Football League, which we did not do yesterday, given the Vanderbilt, Alabama, and Tennessee, Arkansas stories. We'll get into all that coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Paul Kuharski, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning.
So last week, while I was writing some Levis stuff, one of a variety of different textured, I will say, not your standard patient with Will Levis pieces. One of the things I wanted to answer, I didn't wind up answering, was this. Well, Will Levis lost to Vanderbilt. How could he be good?
Yeah,
you know,
heard that a few times.
Yeah, right. So I wanted to have a comeback for this, and so I texted Jim Wyatt and I said, who are the best quarterbacks who've lost to Vandy? I'd like to fuel to use versus the Levis lost to Vandy, so he can't be good. And there aren't great answers to this question. He wrote me back. Josh Dobbs was one,
yep,
and then beat Anthony Richardson 2 years ago. So then Saturday rolled around, and I hadn't written any of my Vanderbilt people to congratulate them yet. At 8:51, unsolicited, just on this text, he wrote me Jalen Milroe.
I bet he took a lot of joy in that.
Yeah.
Oh,
and I just put a thumbs up on it. But I thought that was classic. That he was going through his text. And I'm sure he got probably 100 texts from people all over the country. But he responded to mine that I hadn't refreshed it. It wasn't anywhere near the top of his things, but he remembered that we were having this conversation and wanted to refresh.
Add one to the list.
Yeah. Here's a good one that's going to really give your argument some new power. So
I got another one for you.
By the logic of these fans, now Jalen Milroe cannot be good.
Forget that he just took down Georgia.
Because he's lost to me.
Yep. Looking forward to see how that translates. That's good. Oh, that's good stuff from Jimmy Wyatt. I'm very happy for Jimmy Wyatt. And like you said, very smiley Jimmy Wyatt over the weekend with some of those pictures that came out. Good stuff for him. Around the NFL, we did not get to NFL basically at all yesterday on the program, given what happened over the weekend with Vanderbilt and Alabama, and, of course, with Tennessee and Arkansas as well. Starting in the AFC South, Jacksonville gets their first win of the year, 37-34 against the Colts. Joe Flacco at quarterback for the Colts over the weekend. Actually played pretty well, 33 of 44, 359, 3 touchdowns, quarterback rating of 121.3 for Joe Flacco. Could not stop Trevor Lawrence in that game, who also played great, 28 of 34, 371, 2 touchdowns and a pick, quarterback rating of 119.5. That sets up PK, and we're going to get into the Titans here in just a few minutes, but a pretty big game for them. Colts are at 2-3. Titans with an opportunity to get to 2-3. Jacksonville joining the rest of us mortals with a win on the season over the weekend.
The Colts have not won in Jacksonville in 10 years.
It's one of the most unbelievable stats I've ever heard.
I mean, that is an organizational issue. I mean, that should have been for the last 3 or 4 years an off-season dictum.
Yes.
That we are going to end this thing. And that is an absolutely miserable thing by them. We know divisional football in the NFL is a real wild card. And that things happen that you just cannot foresee happening. But if the Colts are to have any kind of chance to be the second place team in the division, you're going to have to do something against Jacksonville. Now they're going to split at best. That's a terrible, and very predictable result. I think the Colts are a good matchup for the Titans. Callahan was really pumping up, and we'll get more into this, pumping up their explosive offense.
Yeah.
But I think they're defensively susceptible. They're a lot like the Titans in that they don't have superstars. Their best player, conceivably DeForest Buckner's on IR. That's akin to the Titans being without Jeff Simmons. I really don't like where the Colts are. And I think Jacksonville's probably very bad, but not as bad as they've played. Well, the one concern with Jacksonville, and you've heard this now out of New England as well, is their stories with guys talking off the record about the coach having lost the locker room.
Yeah,
And
for
when
sure.
you get that in week 4 and week 5, that's pretty bad.
That's tough to come back from at that point. Colts are bad against the run. They just are. I mean, they've been giving up. I think they're the second worst run team all year. And then they give up 13 for 101 to Tank Bigsby as a team, 23 carries, 126 yards for the Jags. I mean, the Titans.
Couple touchdowns.
the
Good
game plan-
fantasy pickup for PK.
Yeah, look at you.
Tank
Bigsby.
Bigsby.
I mean, the Titans should be able to run the ball in this game. And we're going to get into them trying to run the ball a little bit later in the show as well. But that's a bad loss for Indianapolis. And again, especially when you have your backup quarterback in there and he plays great the way that Flacco did, they go up 37 to Jacksonville. Very disappointing. Now, Jacksonville tried to give it away at the end, but they were able to come back and get that thing won 37-34 after blowing a 14-point lead. Also in the AFC South.
There's a big conversation in Indy now that's not dissimilar. It's on a bigger scale, not dissimilar to what's going on here. You play Flacco for now, you play Richardson for later.
Well, and that one's probably an even more, I think, pronounced scenario in terms of like Flacco, I think absolutely gives them the better chance to win
I mean,
now.
he's a much better option than Rudolph is.
Yes.
That's a much more pronounced A versus B conversation than we're having here.
But my guess is, as we sit here today on Tuesday, that it will probably be Levis versus Richardson coming up on Sunday.
Yeah, well, Levis is playing for sure.
Yeah. Houston taking down Buffalo over the weekend, 23-20.
What did you think of the Houston uniforms?
I think they're awful.
See, I this was crazy to me, but I like them.
Did you?
I like the H for sure.
The H is like, I just don't like the
sticky numbers.
dark
I don't like
with the light blue. I just didn't like that. And then you also have Bruce Matthews, who apparently was a big fan of it, voicing stuff over for the Texans, which was interesting. But I was not a huge fan of those jerseys.
The thing that I like is that, or that I think is cool, is that they don't have a past to go to.
Yes.
And so they create something new as their third, which I think is cool. And I think the H had something to it. I think the H is kind of better than the bull.
Okay. I mean, I could see mine was more the color combo of the light blue, the red, and it basically looked like black out there. And it's like, it looked like a big bruise to me out there.
Nico Collins now week to week, which hurts, but they're getting other people back, and so they could show off their depth. You have to win that game if they're them. It was presented to you opportunities to win that game.
Yes.
So that's a big growth game for them. The Bills getting a lot of grief for clock management at the end. If they had run the ball coming out of their end zone, Houston had timeouts, so the clock stuff would have been the same.
Right.
The issue is getting your punter some space so that he doesn't have to do a fast punt with no space, and could have boomed it better and made Houston have to move it further to get the field goal chance. I think that's a botch by McDermott there. And Buffalo, I think, is one of the 4 best teams. I mean, you've got Kansas City, Baltimore, Buffalo, Houston all bunched up. I think that's clearly the best 4. But Buffalo's losing these games that mean it's not getting home playoff games if it gets things right.
Well, it's Sunday, not that, Stephon Diggs was fine for Houston on Sunday, but Sunday was a game where I was watching it and I thought Buffalo needs another guy. Like, they need another guy at wide receiver. Allen ended up 9 of 30 for 131 yards, 1 touchdown. Was not very good in that game.
30.
And they just weren't creating a ton of separate. Like, Keon Coleman made the one play at 49-yarder for the touchdown. That was pretty much it. Like, they just didn't have a guy really creating a lot of separation.
Devontae Adams is willing to go to the Saints because he knows the quarterback. He's willing to go to the Jets because he knows the quarterback. Neither of those teams are as good as Buffalo. If he went to Buffalo, he could be a big difference maker. He might not like the weather. He might not know the quarterback, but he'd be a much bigger factor for that team in terms of making a playoff difference.
A couple other NFL headlines to get into, including Derrick Henry with another big-time performance for the Baltimore Ravens. We'll get into that coming up next. Also get into all things Tennessee Titans as well. Paul Kuharsky with us all day long on the program today. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. I got some tickets to give away to see Deftones at Bridgestone Arena coming up on March 26th. Be caller number 9, PK's magic number 9, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Caller number 9 will win a pair of tickets to Deftones at Bridgestone Arena coming up on March 26th. Taking your thoughts.
You're welcome, Nick, for a caller 9.
Nick, you better sit there and stare at it. Just wait for caller number 9.
I don't mind it.
Good.
Really?
Good.
No.
All right, next time 19.
19. That's just unrealistic.
Caller 86. Oh, man. One other big game over the weekend. We were talking about this off air, PK. So Baltimore takes down Cincinnati in overtime over the weekend. Cincinnati has a chance to win the game in overtime
And pull even with Baltimore in the standings.
Right. It's
which
a
would have been
massive swing. Just an absolute massive swing. They've got the opportunity to kick the game-winning field goal. The snap is a little bit off. The holder drops the ball, is able to pick it back up, but by the time he picks it back up, it's just leaning to the left. The operation's all screwed up.
It's a miracle it was kicked.
It really was. Like, Evan McPherson kicked it, and you could tell from the time the ball left his foot, it was going wide left. So on the very next play, Derrick Henry breaks a 51-yard run, sets up the game-winning field goal for Justin Tucker, and the Ravens win 41-38. So a couple things on that. Number one, that's 3 wins in a row for Baltimore, 3 big-time performances in a row from Derrick Henry, even though he was pretty much quiet before that. A big play by him, a 51-yarder. We'll get into him specifically here in a minute. Joe Burrow was awesome, 30 of 39, 392 yards, 5 touchdowns, and a pick in that game. They're 1-4, though. And as good as he is, and as good as I think that offense can still be, I think they're in some deep, deep trouble. And, it's not totally impossible to dig yourself out of a 1-4 hole. It's really darn hard, though. And that is a brutal, damaging loss for Cincinnati over the weekend.
Yeah, the defense isn't getting it done. And it just seems like they're done with this cycle of this. They need a restart for some reason. Jamar Chase, excellent, and Burrow is back. But what everything else they had, and they're running the ball well.
Yeah.
I mean, offensively they're fine. Defensively, just not keeping up with it. And then that kind of killer instinct is missing. I don't think Pittsburgh's very good for a team with a good record. But
No.
they're a find a way to win franchise right now. The thing that Baltimore does is, look, Baltimore first 2 weeks offensive line horrible, right? That's a franchise you look at and say, how is their offensive line able to get so much better in the span of 5 weeks? And you look at the Titans and it can't. That's incredibly frustrating. And that organization consistently does things like that, right? And then the Browns are a complete mess.
Yeah.
But I think Cincinnati's blown this season. It's too hard to climb that far back. With Pittsburgh and Baltimore in front of you, and now you've lost the tiebreaker so far to Baltimore already.
So Derrick Henry in the first game as a Raven against Kansas City, 13 carries, 46 yards, and a touchdown, 3.5 a carry. Pretty modest numbers for him. Ever since then, he's gone 18 for 84 against the Raiders with a touchdown, 25 for $151, 2 touchdowns against Dallas, where he dominated that game. Obviously, the big game against Buffalo, where he had the 87-yard run, 24 carries, 199 yards, and a touchdown. And then this past game, only 15 carries, but had the 92 yards and a touchdown, the 51-yard run in overtime, obviously a big part of that. His numbers are really good in Baltimore. He passes the 10,000-yard mark for his career over the weekend as well. What have you made of, I guess, how quickly he's been able to assert himself with the Ravens and kind of this 4-week run he's on with the numbers that he's put up for Baltimore?
Well, I've got a running note in my phone, Henry HOF, my Henry Hall of Fame file, and coming out of last year, I thought he needed a bump. And I think he may have crossed the line now. Previously, among the 16 Hall of Fame eligible backs who won multiple NFL rushing titles, Only Byron Whizzer White, who only played 3 seasons, went on to become an associate justice of the Supreme Court, wasn't enshrined in Canton. But this line that he crossed this weekend, players with 10,000 rushing yards and 100 touchdowns in their first 125 games in NFL history. And he apparently knew the other 4 guys in this. He appreciates NFL history. He joins LaDainian Tomlinson, Adrian Peterson, Emmitt Smith, and Jim Brown.
Pretty good.
And the other thing is, there's nobody else in sight of being able to do this. And there may never, ever, I mean, it's a cyclical league, so we can't say it's never going to happen again. But right now, it looks incredibly unlikely that anybody else there's nobody on the radar right now that looks like they could track to this. Their bell cow backs are way down. Longevity for running backs is way down. Derrick Henry, in my eyes, is a Hall of Famer now, and I'm keeping this this file because I'm expecting to make a presentation, and I'm expecting that my presentation will be short and sweet, and that he'll get 80% of thumbs up the first time that he's presented, because the guy is a unicorn.
Well, he's a unicorn. He's now 30 years old. He's in his first season with a new team. And look, it's still probably way too early in a year to be looking at his pace right now for this season. They are only 5 games in. But, I mean, if you want to look at it that way, he's on pace right now for 1,944 yards this year at 30 years old, which is just unreal. I mean, it's unbelievable what he's doing right now. Now, you know, obviously you're talking about a 150-yard week against the Cowboys in there, and then 199 yards against the Bills. So those are 2 exceptional games that he's already put together. Is it going to be like that for him every week? No, it's not. But, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he's got a couple more like that in the bag for this season. And whether it's 1,900, 1,500, 17, whatever it is, if he stays healthy and he ends up somewhere in that ballpark this year, to do that at 30 years old is unbelievable. Like, if he ends up, 1,500 yards plus this year at 30 years old in his first year with Baltimore, it's insane to me.
And look, it's not a great fit necessarily. There's another Ravenish thing, right?
Yes.
We saw that first game, him standing on the sideline over there looking awkward, and said, he's not a 3-down guy, and the game doesn't shape up right, and the offensive line isn't good enough. And again, 5 games in, leading the league by a significant margin. Long run, a couple long runs that change games. Yep. The guy is that's why he's a unicorn, right? Because how many backs that have, I hate to say limitations because it makes him sound like he's incomplete.
Right.
But I think that's kind of what makes him more of the unicorn, because he is incomplete in some way, shapes, and forms, and still dominant to this level. So it's just extraordinary to behold. And I just can't see. The only argument against him is what's been the value of those rushing yards, I guess.
Right.
Which I think is an argument that's coming in the room, the Hall of Fame voting room. Anti-receiver sentiment that needs to show up now is because there are so many guys with so many receiving yards. You have to say, what's the value of these receiving yards?
Right.
All right. These guys are hitting these numbers, but what have they meant? Well, on the other side of that, you say nobody's hitting these rushing yard numbers. You can say they haven't led to great things, but it hasn't happened anywhere else. He's on this list with these other 4 guys who are amongst the best backs in history. Therefore, he is one of them.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. The other thing that's kind of phenomenal to me in this, and we all know the Titans' offensive line has been horrible the last couple of years here. And you look at his yards per attempt, 2022 here is 4.4 yards per carry, 4.2 last year. And it's like, all right, well, yeah, the offensive line's bad, but Derrick Henry's clearly taken a step back, maybe lost a step as a player. And I still believe, I mean, look, there's a couple runs he had his last 2 years here where we typically would see him pull away where he got caught from behind. It's like okay, well, there it is. There's the step that he's lost. I'm looking at his numbers right now. It's 114 yards a game in Baltimore. He's averaging 6 a carry. Now, again, it's 5 games in, it's early, but he's averaging 6 yards per carry right now, which would be by far his best mark of his career. He had 5.4 in his 2,000-yard season.
So what do you have?
2020.
80. What was that big one? 87.
87.
And then he had this one
This
that was
51.
51.
He had a big one in the Cowboys.
I mean,
game too.
that's prime Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
And he said if he knew that guy was there, he would have scored. I'm not one to not take him at his word. I'm surprised he didn't know the guy was there because he was in front of him for a second before he got in front of him. And also, guys tend to use for years and years. I wrote about this when Eddie George used the scoreboard in the playoff game at the RCA Dome during the 99 run of how he gauged, somebody coming behind him by looking up at the scoreboard.
Yep.
And I know a lot of backs and receivers use that, as a rear view mirror, so to speak. But look, he also hit 21 miles an hour.
Yeah.
He's still hitting 21 miles an hour. That's his range. So, I think there are situations where he's catchable from behind in a way that he wasn't before. But so what?
Yeah.
I
running
mean,
21 miles an hour.
He's over 30. He's hitting 21 miles an hour, and he's going for 57 yards. If he's getting caught from behind inside the 4 and Justin Tucker's hitting the game-winning field goal instead of him getting the touchdown,
you still win.
Well, he's got over 100 touchdowns. He's got over 10,000 yards. If you're nitpicking on that, hell, I'm the biggest nitpicker around. I'm not nitpicking on that.
Exactly. 615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll take more of your thoughts on Derrick Henry. We will also get into the Titans coming up next as well. All that ahead, Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Check out this week's Nashville's best deal. It's Fog Street Lawn Club. Get half off a $30 gift card at thegamenashville.com/deals to dive into the ultimate rooftop experience, British lawn bowling, scrumptious bites, and premier soccer pub vibes. Get half off a $30 gift card to Fog Street Lawn Club now while supplies last. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. PK, we're going to get into basically a Titans reset coming up here in just a few minutes in terms of adjustments for Brian Callahan to make after the bye week. What is in store for the Titans coming up as they get back at it this weekend, starting against the Indianapolis Colts? I do want to start on the quarterback, though. What's your sense for Will Levis and how he's dealing with the shoulder injury and how much of a hindrance that potentially still could be this week?
I think he'll be fine. I don't think it'll be much of a hindrance. And I did straight out ask Callahan if this kind of gives him an out or an easier hook, like to do what they did in Miami. Hey, if the shoulder's bothering him or, he takes a little knock on it, are you in position to do what you did in Miami and make a change to a comfortable alternative?
Right.
And he said, no, but I think yes. I think that there's a freedom here that this could be a somewhat convenient injury for the Titans, that if Levis is off in some way, shape, or form, whether it's shoulder related or not, they could say it's shoulder related and get themselves into a Rudolph comfort zone if the game is shaping itself in a way where Mason Rudolph's deficiencies wouldn't be a bad thing for them. Though the game has to shape itself that way.
Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of confidence in the Titans' ability to shape games in their favor, though I think this weekend, as you've talked about the Colts' poor run defense, perhaps. Buffalo and Detroit,
no,
not so much.
Yeah, I totally agree on that front. Like, look, I mean, I'm interested to see how he responds to it. If his shoulder's good to go, I'd like to see him out there. I told you last week, like, I'm getting pretty close to being out on him. There's too many things that are in his game right now that are red flags to me that are really difficult to see dramatically getting better as things move forward here. I want to see it, though. Like, I want to see him get back in there after the bye week. Can it be like a reset for him? Not only for him, can it be one for Callahan? Have they figured something out over the bye week where they adjust things a little bit tactically as to what they're doing and how they're trying to attack defenses out there? But him specifically, like, it's time to see whether or not he could take a step. And to me, that starts on Sunday. And if he's healthy enough to play, if he gets out there on Sunday, like, I don't want in the aftermath of it anybody using the shoulder as a crutch. If he's healthy enough to play, then he's healthy enough to play.
Even if you're out on him, do you want Rudolph in?
I do not.
Right.
Right.
You'd be out on him, but wanting them to still try.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I've said, like, me being out, I don't expect the organization to come to my conclusion as quickly as I do. I get that.
I think that's where a lot of people are. I think that's where people should be. There's just not a lot to get out of the Rudolph thing. I wrote this earlier I wrote this yesterday. I'm totally anti-tanking. I'm totally anti-thinking about tanking in an early stage. But if losses come naturally out of what you're doing for Levis, that's fine. Also, the Titans, by my count, have had 9 franchise-changing players come out of the draft. Out of 209 picks.
Not a high hit rate.
Right? And 0 quarterbacks. Now, I'm not saying that means you stop trying at quarterback, but I do think fans would be wise to stop hanging their hopes on a miracle franchise-changing player arriving in April.
Well, and
that's kind of a dumb approach to say, well, if we could just lose this year to get ourselves in position, then we can get Trevor Lawrence. when there is no Trevor Lawrence in this draft for starters. And this thing that a couple positions higher is going to save you. Well, you get Joe Alt instead of J.C. Latham. Well, which one of those guys is going to be better? We don't know.
Right.
But there's every chance that Latham is as good or better, right? So, in some situations, a couple spots higher can really make a difference. But in other situations, it makes no difference at all. And I just think pinning so much hope on that. There's this podcast by Malcolm Gladwell, and he takes an approach from it's a sports podcast. And I haven't listened to it in previous years, but somebody pointed it to me this year. And this year it's from the point of view of a fan.
Yeah.
And just in the first episode, he hits on that. This thing that we do as fans where they convince us to constantly buy into this draft hope, which rarely pans out. You're not getting Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes, yet you constantly think you're getting Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
And it's if you step back outside of that and think about it, it's really stupid.
Just look purely at the Titans, right? Like you bring up the drafting, let's say over the past 20 years. You took Vince, 3 overall? Marcus was at 2 overall. I think Jake Locker was at number 8 overall. So you got 3 guys taken relatively high there, none of which turned out to be, Vince made a Pro Bowl and was Rookie of the Year and all that stuff.
Plus, you traded up for Willis and you traded up for Levis.
Exactly. So
you're going to be probably 0 for 5.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you stop trying, but it does mean you should adjust your expectations.
It does. And it does. It also highlights that regardless of where you're drafting these guys, whether it's at the top of the draft, in the second round, wherever, it's a tough hit rate in the NFL to find those quarterbacks. Again, I mean, eventually you got to keep trying and keep doing it, but it's a tough science to master here. If you're the Titans, they've not been able to do it.
And I cited Joe in this piece. You're best off betting against every one of them.
Yeah,
every one of them. And in this piece, I mentioned, and I've gotten some ridicule for it, but we've seen Sam Darnold bounce back.
Yep.
We've seen Baker Mayfield bounce back. We've seen Derek Carr bounce back to a lesser degree.
Yep.
Geno Smith. So when you start thinking about those names, there are some other names out there now. Zach Wilson is in the middle of that process, right? Go, sit, rehabilitate.
Kenny Pickett. Yep.
Kenny Pickett conceivably won. Trey Lance conceivably won.
Yep.
Are those guys somewhere next year as rehabilitated starters who can give you a chance? I mean, those are paths you have to consider while you're looking at everything. Darnold's a free agent prize next year.
Yep.
All of these things are open to teams looking for it. And another option is that Levis isn't good this year, and they still go about continuing to build a team around him, not as much for his sake. Maybe he surprises you, but to line up for a quarterback, give him yet another chance, more time, and then look for a solution the year after that when there's a better draft and you've given him even more time.
615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. We got a whole lot to get into with the Tennessee Titans with PK coming up next. We'll do that. We encourage your participation as well on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Mike Herndon from PaulKuharski.com will be with us at 7:30 on the program. We'll be joined by Gentry Estes from the Tennessean at 8 o'clock. We'll get his thoughts on the Vanderbilt win against Alabama. All that ahead. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Hour number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Paul Kuharski in for Rexrode for the next 3 days. Nick Keyser here with us as well this morning. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Mike Herndon will be with us at 7:30. We'll get into all manner of different topics with the Tennessee Titans with him, so looking forward to that coming up a little bit later this hour. Titans taking on the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday. They've had the bye week. They're back at it this week, and now it's full go from here to the end of the season. No more breaks upcoming for the Titans. And a lot of things at top of mind for Titans fans right now. I think one of those is how does Brian Callahan adjust? You've had the 4 games here where you finally pick up your first win on the road in Miami against just a hapless offense led by the Dolphins with Tyler Huntley. So you've walked into the bye week on a positive note from a results standpoint, winning the game. Now, what changes after a 1-3 start to the regular season? And I think obviously the quarterback position is what you look at first when you start to really break it down with the Titans. Will Levis has got to play better than he's played to this point in the season. They have to find a way as an offense to get their drop back passing game at a more dangerous level than what we've seen. And yes, that's Levis. That's also the offensive line. There's a lot that has to get better in that area as the Titans move forward here. And Brian Callahan was asked about that, the drop back passing game specifically. It's been bad. How does it get better as the Titans go along here? Here's what Brian Callahan had to say.
Why do you think you pass the drop back is the element that's having the most trouble?
I think you're dealing with a mix of playing some pretty solid fronts early in the season with a young line that was coming along. And so I think we've given up more pressure than we'd like to give up. That affects the passing game. You get into some spots like in the Green Bay game where now they know you're passing it. It ends up being a feast when those things happen. So it's probably just a conglomeration of a week-to-week things that were good and bad. Again, not enough probably sample size to really feel strongly one way or the other, but it's a combination of the pass protection, of decision making at quarterback, and our ability to put guys in the right spot. So it's sort of a 3-pronged approach. I take probably more of the blame of it than anything, is just keep finding ways to make that better for us. But yeah, it's got to improve for sure for us to continue to try to win games.
So PK, my question for you is, you hear that answer from Brian Callahan. How fixable do you think some of the problems we've seen in the drop back passing game realistically are for the Titans as they move ahead here?
Well, I think the protection's the biggest part. And, you can fix that protection a little bit with help, particularly on the right side. Not just a chip necessarily, but keeping the tight end in or putting a 6th offensive lineman out there. The concern to me is the best thing about Will Levis last year was some of these amazing throws that he made downfield.
Yep.
How many amazing throws has he made downfield this year?
Maybe one.
Not many.
Yeah.
I mean, that throw, was it to Ridley or to
Yeah.
Hopkins that snuck through 2 jets down
Ridley, yep.
with a 40-yard touchdown? So somehow that's been neutered or taken out. I think it's a side effect of all of this. So we've talked about mastering the mundane and all of that, and taking the short stuff and all of that. And he's not been terrific at that. And in exchange for that, it seems you've given up a lot of this stuff that was better under Tim Kelly and Mike Vrabel in terms of emphasizing the quick release and the big arm. And so I think that's a concern, and that needs to be fixed. And I think there needs to be more determination to get the ball to Calvin Ridley. They spent a lot of money on Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley's a big play guy. I don't care if you're getting it to him on some shorter crossing stuff that lets him build up a head of steam and run away from people like A.J. Brown used to do on a lot of his long stuff. Or if, so if it's a big yards after catch play, or if you're throwing it to him deep. I know his yards per catch is big, but there aren't enough catches. I think
Right.
He's got 9 catches on 19 targets. That's not a good enough hit rate. You got to emphasize that. And, driving the ball all the way down the field on a 15 or 17 play drive is nice in terms of game control and all of that, but nothing demoralizes the other side like a big play, and nothing lifts your team like a big play. And we're not seeing enough of those and enough opportunity for those. It seems like this offense is somehow tamping that down.
Well, the bottom line, you have to make those plays because it's too hard in this league to repeatedly drive down the field 10, 12 play drives on a consistent basis. Like, you're going to make a mistake. There's going to be a penalty at some point that hinders that. You have to find a way to generate explosive plays. If you don't, it's just too hard to sustain offense in this league.
I think that's
now.
a good point. You need too much to go right too often for an offense that hasn't proven that it's good at sustaining drives without a holding penalty that gets you in 3rd and 17. And then they can't convert and they're punting. And so I think that drop back passing element. The other thing is the expectation was that part would be good or better. And we haven't seen the signs of it. I think also they're overly reliant on Treylon Burks. I don't understand what I do understand what Burks is doing, that he's out there. But it's primitive. I mean, that's great that he's blocking well and doing all of those things. I'm not convinced that Hopkins can't block well and do those things and be threatening at the same time. I'm not convinced that Nick Westbrook-Akina can't. We know he can do all those things, that he does all of those things right, and that he's a reliable pass catcher who may not take people as deep, but is going to make a play when the ball comes his direction. And he's not been targeted this season. And this offense has got me in knots to the point that I'm desperate to see NWI target.
Well, the other thing too is, like, you heard Callahan in that clip bring up the Green Bay game where, and it's true, they got into the second half and they were down by enough where they, the Packers knew that they were going to pass and they were able to kind of pin their ears back and rush the passer, which happens in the NFL. Now, there are plenty of teams that get in situations where the other team knows they're going to pass and they hold up long enough in pass protection
when
where
you're
it's not a
down
complete
10
disaster.
or 13. We've seen teams come back from 10 or 13 down to tie a game.
Like, you still got to be able to block. You still got to be able to block when the other team knows that you're throwing the football. And like that can't be a crutch for this offensive line moving forward. They got to find a way to move past that.
Yeah, they want to play from ahead. Everybody wants to play from ahead. Sometimes you have to play from behind. Show me that you can compete from behind. If you're down 13, sell tickets for half a game.
Right. I mean, that you've got to find a way to, no, you don't have to be perfect. Like, sometimes especially when you're going up against really good pass rushers, and by the way, they're getting ready to see some, maybe not necessarily this week, but Aiden Hutchinson is right around the corner. Like, they're going to have some problems to deal with here in the next few weeks here. You're going to be in some situations where your drop back passing game is going to have to be a big part of it. Your offensive line is going to have to hold up. Like, you got to find a way as a coaching staff to do that. And I'll say this too. Like, I think, yes, the explosive plays have not been there anywhere near where they need to be a functional, competent NFL offense. I expected a little bit more out of the quick game from the passing game, from the standpoint of getting the ball into somebody's hands and then making a play. How many tackles have a Calvin Ridley or a Hopkins? And I know it's not really part of Hopkins' game, or a Conquo. How many tackles have they forced to be missed this year? How many? When's the last time you saw a Titan player? And I'm not asking Derrick Henry superhero somebody.
Pollard's the only guy that's making people miss, and the running backs in general. And we can get into this. There's a lot of these charts come out during the week that plot every team by logo on these charts, right? You don't want to be in the bottom left quadrant. You desperately want to be in the top right quadrant. And the Titans are often in these, they're in the upper left quadrant or the bottom right quadrant, which means they're very good at one of the elements and very bad at one of the other elements. So this one is yards before contact and after contact per rush. I've tweeted this out. I'll retweet it in a minute. Yards per carry after contact. about 3.75, an outstanding number.
Yep.
Way up in the top left quadrant. Only, New England's similar. Washington and Jacksonville are better. But yards before contact, 0. Like maybe a quarter yard, not even a quarter yard.
It's not good.
Absolute last. I mean, the Jets are the only ones under a half yard with them, but they've got maybe 0.75 yards. I mean, it's crazy if you look at this picture. So the Titans were touting, and it only counts as a quarter, as to how well they ran in Miami. But you look at this and you say, boy, Pollard and Spears are really doing some work.
Yep.
And this run blocking that they're touting, that these guys, the run blocking will get them going for pass blocking. This suggests that the backs are doing the work, not the offensive line, that these guys are getting touched super early, and they're making things happen after initial contact, which is not what you want to see. You want to be here, Baltimore or Philadelphia, which aren't top right, but they're far to the right, where they're getting yards both before and after contact.
Yep, no doubt. 615-737-1025, our phone number. How do the Titans adjust after the bye week? Are some of the problems that we've seen from them fixable as they move forward? We'll continue that conversation coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, The Game.
You talked about maybe the willingness and necessity to be adaptable and willing to pivot based on what you learn about your team. In the self-scouting you've done based on a quarter of your season, what kind of pivots are you maybe willing or ready or need to make?
There's a couple of things. I think a lot of it more is just things that I can probably do better. Certain calls and certain spots. It's really more. It's a small sample size at this point. Still, you'd love to have 6-7 games behind it, but but through 4 games, there's definitely things that I think we can improve on. Some things that I can do better to help our offense. There's a couple of schematic things that you shift around and tweak and maybe try to lean into more. Obviously not going to tell you those things at this moment, but we feel pretty good about what we learned about our team through the first month and what direction we're going to head from here. I feel pretty good about it.
As Brian Callahan yesterday, Titans preparing for the Indianapolis Colts coming up on Sunday at Nissan Stadium. Opportunity for them to get to 2-3, potentially get back into the swing of it here in the AFC. We'll see if the Titans can take advantage of that coming up on Sunday. Brian Callahan not willing to go into detail there. With some of the things
of course. I do think he's being honest there in his self-evaluation. And I don't think it's I think the personnel is failing him to a degree, but I think he's failing himself to a degree, and he's being candid there. He needs to do a better job of, and he said it earlier on the drop back thing. Part of it is having people in the right spots. Having people in the right spots is saying that the play calls aren't good enough, or the play designs aren't good enough. And I think that's a very fair and honest self-critique, and that needs to be part of what's going on here. I think that win was important in terms of continued buy-in, but I think there has to be some doubt there. And if things go badly, particularly if things continue to go badly on offense and they lose and the defense continues to play pretty well, you have to worry a little bit about the defense wondering like, hey, we're doing our stuff over here and we're not seeing results from the other side and we're losing because of it.
Hopefully the self-scouting included figuring out how to stop somebody from blocking a punt, which almost happened for the 3rd time against Miami.
Yeah, it's special teams outside of Nick Folk is
disaster,
quite poor, and needs to be significantly better.
Let's go back to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Cody. Cody, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning. Thank you.
What's up?
I feel like I think after the bye, he'll come out a little bit better. The good thing about the bye gives him time to reevaluate his game. I do feel like maybe they need to simplify the offense. I feel like the game is probably a little too fast-paced for him, and he's having a hard time adjusting. I think if they just simplify it, slow it down, I think he'll be fine.
Thanks for the call, Cody. I hear that. I also you need your second-year quarterback to be taking some steps where you're not having to simplify things and you're able to introduce more things, put more things on his plate. Is that realistic for him right now in this offense? And that goes back to protection too. Like how realistic is being able to do that? We talk about adjustments the offense can make. Well, if your drop back passing game doesn't get significantly better where you can't protect the quarterback and you don't have time to let some of these things develop, it's hard to do that in the NFL. But, am I worried right now about them overcomplicating the offense? I don't know that that's my chief concern right now. My chief concern is, can you protect the quarterback? And when you do, can the quarterback make smarter decisions with the football? Some of this we put on, we're talking about Callahan and adjustments he can make and all that. I think all those things are valid conversations, but some of this is pretty simple. Like your quarterback's got to be smarter with the football. And if you do that, then you're probably like the results a little bit better than what we've seen through the first 4 games.
I had a conversation, Friday afternoons are a pretty good time to talk to Callahan. We ask maybe 5 questions with cameras on, and then it's kind of more informal. And I asked him either last week or the week before, because I got a good question from a reader actually about, is the sophistication level of the offense slowing these guys down?
Right.
Is the learning curve slowing these guys down? And I asked him about how sophisticated it is. And he said he'd rated it as about average. in the league. And so I think that's significant, that he doesn't think it's a particularly hard thing to learn.
Yep.
Not particularly easy, but not particularly hard, right in the middle. So in terms of simplifying it, I don't think that's necessary based on everything. And they say that Levis has it.
Right.
So I don't think it's a matter of it's too much for him. I think it's the decision making in the action. He's got it going into the game. It's when stuff happens that's off schedule or that's a surprise, when the defensive lineman shows up in the window where he's not supposed to be. How do I react to that? And I go back to, as I was kind of learning this stuff, Floyd Reese talked about quarterbacks, that being the thing. All right, this guy's great when everything unfolds the way it's supposed to unfold.
Yeah.
Now that happens very rarely. So what does he do when things don't unfold the way they're supposed to unfold? That's what I need to know. And I think that's the story with Will Levis so far this season, and oftentimes last season. When things don't go the way they're supposed to go, Will Levis, he wasn't making these kind of mistakes last year. So we need to throw out last year, and we need to ask why it's so different than last year. But so far this year, when things don't go like they're supposed to go, which is they need to do better making it go the way it's supposed to go more often, he's failing. He's got a failing grade.
There's no doubt. And the question is, because I'm with you, like we've talked about this with Levis. I have no doubts about, preparation and his understanding of the offense and everything on paper that you need to handle heading into a game. I have full confidence that he and the staff are handling. But it's different when you get out there. And how does the information that you're processing live, how do you make that translate into more what the expectation is on paper as you're heading out there? And some people can do that, and some people just can't. And it's too early, I think, to make a complete declaration on that one way or the other from Will Levis. But there's no doubt, it's got to get better in terms of when you're on the field, the decision making, whatever's going on. He talked to this earlier this year about rewiring the brain, right? How easy is that to do? How long does that take when you're on the field? That's a difficult thing.
And the rewiring can only happen through experience. So This is another conversation about patience. And it's hard to be patient. And there are only 17 games, but each game is a big chance for the rewiring to happen. Is it happening? We went from 2 really, really bad plays to 2 more conventional interceptions that Kurt Warner's explained to us can happen. Then we saw Aaron Rodgers make the same kind of bad play with a defensive lineman dropping into coverage.
Yep.
That's all well and good. You're allowed to see that guy. Kurt Warner's explained to us what he's looking at to make the initial decision. That's fine. And I understand that. And Kurt Warner's a lot smarter than I am on this. But I look at it and I say, I understand. He's looking for that guy going to the flat. Well, common sense says he's also allowed to see the defensive lineman dropping in there and say, okay, that's a problem. I'm not going there.
As I said,
it's very fast.
Yeah.
It's quick processing, but it's what you're asking a quarterback to do.
No doubt about it.
It's the job.
615-737-1025, our phone number. Mike Herndon from paulkuharsky.com will be with us coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Paul Kuharski, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning, talking all things Tennessee Titans. And to help us do that, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in our friend Mike Herndon from PaulKuharski.com. Mike, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you guys?
We're awesome, man. Appreciate you taking time to be with us. Mike, we've been talking a lot today about the drop-back passing game for the Titans. Obviously, it's not been good, and it's something that's got to get dramatically better in a hurry. How fixable do you think some of these problems are for the Titans in their drop-back passing game, whether it's the protection, whether it's generating explosive plays, which we haven't seen a ton of so far? How much better, how much more room on the rope do you think there is for this drop-back passing game?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it can get a lot better. It's largely, to me, protection mixed with a little bit of, obviously the quarterback, not being fully comfortable in the offense yet. And I think it's pretty obvious, when you watch it on tape that he's, still thinking more than feeling the plays, the reads, everything. And I think it's just going to take time and reps, and that's not a satisfactory answer for fans who want results right now. But I just think that's going to require a little bit of patience to get there, and it's going to have to require better protection. And I think you need a little bit more from Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins too. I mean, Hopkins has had the injury and been slowed a little bit there, but they're paying those guys a lot of money for not a lot of production right now. And sure, we can put some of that on the offensive line and the quarterback, but if your receiver's getting open and demanding the ball, then the ball's going to find them at some point. So I think it's a little bit of all of the above, but I do think there's a path where it gets better here after the bye, and I think the bye, frankly, was probably pretty well timed for them to get a little bit of a mental reset. Look at some things that have worked, what hasn't worked, and maybe retool going into, what the middle of the year now.
We know these charts just fly out after a weekend's worth of games and data come out. The Titans, I thought, were far too excited about their run performance against Miami. They certainly had run volume with 40 carries. But when you factor in that Pollard had a 41-yard run and ended up with a 4-yard average, and Spears, I think, was 2.9, I hardly thought that they ran the ball great. And then Rich Rebar puts out his graphic, yards per carry after contact, charted against yards per carry before contact. And the Titans are way up, almost touching the line with yards before contact. Just over 0, but very significant yards after contact, which suggests that the offensive line is not doing much run blocking at all, and that Pollard and Spears are doing God's work on their own. What does all of this tell you about the state of the Titans' run game?
And I think that is reflected in the tape, and you look at just that Miami game specifically. Pollard had 112 yards after contact and 88 yards rushing for the game. So, he was on average being touched about a yard in the backfield on every run attempt, which is horrendous from the offensive line. And I do think, just watching it, Pollard and Spears have been fantastic. I think both of them have been excellent. Pollard especially, but they need more help from the offensive line. And we still see things that, again, are reflective of a new offense, a young offensive line, the youngest offensive line in the league, and a relatively inexperienced group. We saw a play on Monday night where, I think it was Radins and Skoronski both pulled and ran right into each other in the backfield. So, I mean, there are clearly some understanding, or I guess being on the same page, cohesiveness that is lacking with the offensive line at the moment. I think physically they haven't been bad necessarily. It just does not look like a group that is in sync currently, and that's Bill Callahan's responsibility to get them in sync. But when you have a young group, when you have 4 new starters out of that group, I think it's going to take some time for them to really get there. But I would say the encouraging thing is physically they're not getting whipped in the run game. It's just it does not look like their timing and syncing of the blocks is quite where you would want it to be to really be excelling in the run game. And the yards before contact metric has got to get better for them to have real success on the ground. Because I agree that Miami performance, they didn't have a ton of negative plays in the run game, which is positive, but they also weren't highly efficient either. I mean, they pretty much just grounded out. And again, you're talking about a performance that had the second longest drive of the game was 29 yards. So it was not a stellar showing by the offense by any means, except for the fact that they crossed that magical 30-point barrier.
Your piece is up at paulkuharsky.com. 6 areas where the Titans need to show more post-bye. One of the things you say, people aren't going to like this because it's actually favorable for Will Levis. But his turnover numbers 9, that luck has played in there, which is only to suggest that things could become more favorable for him. He really is only 7th in turnover-worthy plays amongst quarterbacks, whereas the quarterback they may face this weekend, Anthony Richardson, 3 percentage points higher in turnover-worthy plays. Talk us through the luck factor in what's going on with him.
Yeah, certainly. I think the data suggests if you look at his 2023 turnover-worthy play rate, which is, looking at PFF charts, the play itself, whether the interception was dropped or, a ball hits the ground, I think if the quarterback fumbles, they generally grade it as a 50-50 proposition as to whether or not it's going to be recovered by the offense, which I think is historically accurate. So right now, Levis is not getting any of the bounces. All of the fumbles that he's had have been recovered by the opposing team. He's throwing, the throws that he's put in harm's way have all been caught. Now, some of that is because he's doing these dumb things like trying to roll the ball back to Tajay Spears or flick it to the sidelines and give an easy interception to the defense. That's true. That is part of that. But his turnover-worthy play rate last year was 4.5%. This year it's 4.7%. Is basically the same statistically. And he only had 8 turnovers combined all of last year between interceptions and fumbles. So he's already outpaced that on, about a third of the number of dropbacks. So it's a part of it is luck. And I do think part of it, with Anthony Richardson, he's due for a little bit of regression to the mean as far as he's going to see more turnovers if he continues to play the way he's played over the first 5 games for the Colts. So I do think that there's a little bit of luck baked into that. That doesn't excuse the turnovers by any sense. He's still putting the ball in harm's way too much. But I think there's other quarterbacks that rank higher on a turnover-worthy play rate that you'd probably be surprised with. Josh Allen, who a lot of people have as an MVP candidate, is higher than Will Levis currently in turnover-worthy plays. There's some others. Patrick Mahomes is right in that neighborhood. Look, they get away with that, I think, in a way because they make really good plays around those turnover-worthy plays. And Levis is not making enough really good plays around his bonehead plays. But that's a separate topic to me than the turnovers, which has been kind of the biggest drumbeat with Levis. And I frankly think a lot of that's going to fix itself just as the season wears on and you get a bigger sample size for the luck to kind of even back out.
Mike, on the other side of the ball, the numbers would tell you it's the number 1 defense in the league if you want to go strictly by yards per game. Now, they forced 1 turnover, and that was on a backward pass. So there's a lot of work to be done there in terms of forcing turnovers as they move ahead here. But my question for you is, how big of a believer are you in this Titans defense? Do you think the Titans have an elite or a close to elite defensive unit?
I don't think they're elite for just one specific reason, and that is the problem we've talked about with this defense going back to the offseason. It's a lack of pass rush. They do not have a consistent pass rush, and to be an elite defense, I think that's a non-negotiable. Right now, the entire Titans defense, every single player who has played a defensive snap for the Titans this season has 43 pressures by PFF charting. Aiden Hutchinson has 40 by himself.
Yeah.
So there is a massive gap between guys like Hutchinson, who is, consistently creating pressure, creating havoc in the backfield, and what the Titans are doing collectively as a group. Harold Landry is getting the quarterback down at a good rate when he gets back there, but he's not creating a ton of pressures. He only has 10 on the year, and then Arden Key has mostly been MIA, although I think his past 2 games have been his best so far. So maybe the light's coming on a little bit there, but none of the depth guys have shown anything. Jalen Harrell, Caleb Murphy, none of those guys have even a pressure so far this season. So for them to jump into that elite category, you're going to have to find some production, and you got to look at the interior too, where Jeff Simmons is supposed to be the guy, and he has 2 pressures this season. That is not what you want out of a guy that's getting paid like he's a Dexter Lawrence, a Chris Jones level guy. He's not produced from a pass rushing standpoint anywhere close to that, and they need him to get there sooner than later if they want to jump into that elite category. But I do think they're very good. I don't want to be totally negative on them. It's obviously been a good unit. They are, ranked in the top 10 if you look at any advanced metrics like EPA per play or DVOA, some of the stuff that bakes in a lot of the context that you need to consider when looking at defensive performance. So, and that's without turnovers, right? But I do think the turnovers are linked to the lack of pressure, because most of the time, if you're forcing turnovers, it's going to be because you're putting pressure on the quarterback. So I think that's the kind of key area that they need to improve if they want to get into that next category.
Both the stats and the eyeball test tell us Levis was better last year than he is this year. Do you think this new system requires him to take some, or has resulted in him taking some steps back before he can go forward? Or is there enough evidence to say maybe it's not the best fit to show off his best qualities, that quick release and that deep arm?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I do think they did a lot last year to try to, I don't want this to sound like derogatory towards the Will, but they did a lot to try to dumb down the offense last year for him, make it a 1-2 read, simple, which, helps a young quarterback certainly. And I think this Callahan offense is a little bit more, kind of 201 from a terminology and what they're asking him to do as a quarterback standpoint. So I do think there's a little bit of growing pains that you're seeing with him being asked to make full field reads, being asked to make more decisions generally within the offense. And you're seeing him struggle with a little bit of that. But then again, like, they've tried some of those play action shot plays and haven't really had a ton of success hitting those, that are simpler reads, more defined throws within the offense. And there hasn't been a ton of success there either. So it's hard for me to say that, hey, if they just switched back to that approach, we'd see something a lot more like last year. I'm not totally sure that's 100% the case, but I will be interested to see if they lean more into that coming out of the bye, kind of getting back to some of, as much as we may hate to see it after the last 6-7 years, run the ball, play action off of it kind of offense to at least stabilize things until Levis gets a little bit more comfortable in the true drop back passing game.
He's Mike Herndon. He writes deep analysis at paulkuharsky.com every Tuesday. His latest is up now. Check it out.
Absolutely. Mike, appreciate your time as always, my man. Thanks for being with us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Of course. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, pal.
Absolutely. Mike Herndon, our guest on Robby and Rexrode. We'll begin the 8 o'clock hour. We'll get into Vanderbilt's upset over Alabama with him. All that ahead, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, the game.
Sometimes he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. And sometimes he's just, well, Joe.
Awkward moment. Let's do it.
This is the Rex Rant, now on Robby and Rexrode.
You have to restrain yourself. Some of us do it better than others. Some, like your afternoon host, are completely shtick-filled, like doom negative. You know, and he may have had a worse.
He's full of shtick. Is that what you're saying?
He may have had a worse view of this team than others.
He's not going to stop. It works every show.
Where's the discipline?
Yeah.
We need a hard ass in there.
It is that time of the day. Normally the Rex Rant or the Rob Rant. PK is stepping into the fold today for a nice rant. PK, I'm looking forward to this. The floor is yours.
I'll call it a primary complaint.
Okay, I like it.
So I've come to terms with the fact that a broadcast of a game could be anywhere these days, and I'm a subscriber to virtually everything. But I'm surprised last night when I say baseball into my remote control that the Yankees-Royals game comes up as a TNT broadcast on Max. And I still have trouble with HBO being called Max because I still think Cinemax should hold the rights to Max. It still exists as far as I know. Anyway, you know, I have no problem flipping over there, though I hate going to a streaming thing because from a streaming thing, you can't just conveniently flip over to the football game during commercials. It's a bigger process.
Yep.
I've come to terms with that. You can't just flip over. All right. But and I hate Comcast with all my heart. I'm leaving Comcast very soon. I just have to find the right internet provider in order to go to YouTube TV.
Yep.
Lots of my friends have YouTube TV. They swear by it. I haven't found friends who swear by their internet provider that I need to replace Comcast. But the production, not the production, I don't know if I'm the only person that has the problem. I tweeted straight to Comcast, so I didn't want, because everybody would just be like, oh, you're complaining about something again. The broadcast was this quirky, streaming, like 1990s level stream. Stop, start, sound goes out, picture stalls, completely unenjoyable, like, you know, remember when you went to a hotel room and you had to plug your computer in and you ended up on the phone with the guy trying to file a story?
Oh, yeah.
You know, it was like that. Now I'm paying a fortune. I mean, way too much to Comcast. And for this to be an issue for me circa 2024 is just outrageous, to the point where I'm rebooting my modem and I'm unplugging my TV, willingly missing a half inning of the game in order to get it better. And when everything restarts, it's exactly the same. This is just not in the realm of possibility for technology in 2024. Between the price I'm paying, between the technology that's available, between you forcing me to go to a third-party app and MLB doing that, I don't know how you spread this thing all the way to Max.
It is kind of wild.
All right? But I'm willing to have Max. I accept it. But I need Max to work. All right? I'm willing to listen to Bob Costas and Darling on this game. I'm willing for all of this stuff. All I want is for it to work.
Yeah.
I'm willing to absorb a Yankees loss, but I need it to work.
Oh, man.
My wife, you know, is generally, it's a secondary thing for her. She's on her phone reading a book or doing whatever she's doing. And she's like, how are you surviving this? I'm like, I stayed relatively calm because I knew I had no alternative except to tweet blast Comcast. But this day, when I call Comcast, I'm going to make them beg. I'm going to pretend like I'm going to stay. Like,
This may need to be recorded.
What's your best offer? No, come on, really. I've been a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, give me the supervisor. And then I'm going to say, Sally, you have ripped me off for 25 years. I'm out.
I feel like this has to be recorded now. I volunteer. I'll do it.
Yeah,
I'll be the recorder.
I'll roll tape on that bad boy. I just, I don't know. And, you know, I would have had to watch that game on Max connected to my streaming anyway, and it was probably a Max problem. So my problem is probably more with Max streaming than it is with, now maybe it's with my Comcast internet. I don't know. It's hard to find who to blame.
Yeah.
There's so many potential people. If I had time today, I'd spend time tracking them all down.
I'm glad you can deal with
Unfortunately, I
Costas.
need a nap.
Yes, you will. I'm glad you can deal with Costas. He drives me nuts on the play-by-play.
I don't mind Costas. There's an old schooly feeling to him. What do you dislike about him most?
It's just the tangents that he goes off into that really just drive me nuts. It may just be his voice too. There's a lot of things that drive me nuts.
Well, the thing that drove me crazy most about Costas is that every time Giancarlo Stanton hit a ball that was potentially a double play, he made it like there was a question as to whether the fourth slowest man in baseball would be thrown out at
Thrown out
first
by 6
to have a
steps.
chance at a double play here. No, Bob. Unless they throw the ball into the stands, the moment that ball is off the bat, they're 2 outs.
There will be a double play, my friend. I promise. 615-737-1025, our phone number. We wish PK good luck in his ongoing battle.
I have a friend who's texting me. He thinks it was on a normal channel last night. If that's the case, I really have to reconsider my life. He flipped to it on a normal channel last night. Do you have Comcast? Yeah, well, he says TBS maybe. It was a TBS broadcast, but it was on
Max.
Yeah. My guide was not giving me a TBS option last night. Trust me. I was hunting.
Just searching for it. We'll have Gentry Estes for the Tennessean coming up next. We'll get his thoughts on Vanderbilt's big upset against Alabama. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Final hour, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Paul Kuharski, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. Vanderbilt, the story of the weekend in sports, much less college football, taking down Alabama. And to help us talk more about that, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our friend Gentry Estes from the Tennessean. Gentry, good morning.
You said taking down Alabama, and I said, we'll take you down to Alabama.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, Gentry.
We will go down.
Gentry down in Alabama, seeing the after effects of the big loss.
Gentry, do you
how
have
is it down there?
Good morning, guys. Good to be with you.
Good to have you with us. Appreciate you taking time to be with us. So there's a lot to kind of sift through here in the aftermath of all that. I want to start, Gentry, I think the most shocking thing to me, and I was at the Preds game watching this all take place on Saturday. And by the time the second quarter rolled around, I just looked down the row on Media Row and I looked at Alex Dory and I said, Alabama can't stop them. Like, they cannot stop that Vanderbilt offense. And that was true throughout the course of the entire game. I was blown away by the game plan Vanderbilt had, the execution of the offense, and that part of it. I mean, there's nothing fluky about it. That offense of Vanderbilt kicked the butt of Alabama for 60 minutes.
Yeah, and I think you can tell a lot of the national narrative on this was always going to be Nick Saban's not at Alabama anymore, and this is, the first indication of the empire finally crumbling, and maybe so. But those who actually did watch this game had to be impressed with how Vanderbilt won it. Yeah, I mean, like you said, this wasn't an accident. I mean, you could tell early on there were indicators of how Vanderbilt could win this game, but I sat there and watched it for about 3 hours, just waiting on that moment where Vanderbilt was going to Vanderbilt up the situation and find a way to lose, or Alabama was going to get something done. It just didn't occur to me, that this was real until right to the very end, that you finally say, you know what, this is actually really going to happen. Even as you said, even early in the game, there were indications that Alabama was having a really hard time dealing with what Vanderbilt was doing offensively. And, Vanderbilt's defense is still susceptible to the big play.
Yep.
And, you saw that too, but that's an opportunistic group. They do force turnovers, and the two that they forced were both huge in the course of that game. And, it's pretty, I've been to a lot of games, and I've been surprised a lot, but this was certainly up there in terms of just how shocked I was.
Well, no doubt about that. It was unbelievable to watch happen. And another example, and this is the most extreme example, obviously, Gentry, but Diego Pavia and his impact on that offense. Number one, I think the attitude and the belief that he brings with him. But then number two, the execution, right? I mean, look, he completed 16 out of 20 passes. He threw for 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. We know what the threat he is in the running game. I mean, that was high-level football that he played in that game on Saturday. He has been unbelievable to watch for this team.
Diego Pavia, and I remember when New Mexico State went to Auburn and won last year, and I remember watching that game and thinking it at the time. Pavia is that guy who may not impress you for a lot of the game, certainly throwing the ball, but when it gets to about 4th and 3, he's going to have his best pass of the whole game, and that's going to happen. The clutch factor with this guy is just unreal. The play he made on 4th down, that was probably the biggest play of the game, was a touchdown pass. And he's going off his first read. It felt almost impromptu what he did. And he does that about as well as anyone. I mean, you don't want to compare a guy to Johnny Manziel. It's a different player, different level, but that's what it's like. A guy who can just make plays and kind of rally his team around him. And, it's really nothing new. Everybody's kind of waking up to the idea of what Vanderbilt has here. But even going back to the preseason, you could get that sense. He'd been with the team maybe 10 minutes, and he was already voted the team captain, and you had all the teammates talking about what he meant to them. And it's a mentality that's infectious around a team that was already being doubted anyway, and being told how there's so many things they can't do just because they're Vanderbilt. And it kind of fits Pavia. He's a guy who, had to walk onto a JUCO and has always been told he wasn't, going to be able to make it at this level as a quarterback. And, it's been a remarkable fit, especially when you bring in his coaches from New Mexico State and a lot of his teammates. That's a pretty comfortable situation.
So what does Clark Lee do to ensure this isn't a one-off glory moment for the university and that it is, in fact, a major building block?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's you go to Kentucky. I think a lot of what happened to Alabama this weekend too was, I mean, look, they had such a big win over Georgia, they were going to come out flat, and you could kind of expect that. And I think they took Vanderbilt lightly, and I'm not so sure people are going to be taking Vanderbilt lightly the rest of the season. They still have a very tough schedule, and I don't think they're going to sneak up on anybody anymore after what happened. So it's certainly fair to wonder, how can they build on this? And I do think they need to build on this. The idea, everybody talked about what Nick Saban said on the Pat McAfee show of him saying Vanderbilt was the easiest place to play in the league because you have more fans than they do. Nick Saban wasn't wrong. I mean, that's how it is. And it's not just for Alabama. Most of the SEC or big time teams that come into that stadium do that. Virginia Tech had more fans than Vanderbilt. So I feel like there's still a level of consistency they need to show and prove this wasn't just a flash in the pan kind of moment to be able to get fans to consistently want to come out and support the program. So it's a heck of an opportunity for them. And it does feel like everyone's kind of treated this as a lifetime milestone kind of victory. And you know what? It doesn't have to be. They have some big games left on the schedule. And, again, for a team that's been doubted and told it what it can't do, you go beat the number one team in the country, and now anything seems possible. So it could, if there's more confidence here, who knows what this team is capable of.
Gentry, on that front, I said this yesterday on the show. To me, that environment Saturday night and the aftermath of everything is a perfect example of why investing in athletics matters. And we've talked about this with Vanderbilt, right? Like it's taken them a long time to get to this point, and they finally, with NIL and the transfer portal and certainly the facilities that are under construction over there, they're starting to enter into that modern era of athletics. But Saturday night, I think a good example of what athletics can do for a program, particularly in football, when you come away with a win like that. And like this one does feel different, right? Like Vanderbilt's had some ranked wins. They've had some good seasons. They've not had anything that approaches what we saw on Saturday night. And I'm interested moving forward here to see what that does for investment level in the program, what that does for fan interest in the program, and then ultimately, what does it do for Clarkley and recruiting? Like they've already had one recruit flip in the aftermath of that that they've landed. I'm really interested to see like the tangible impact of kind of building that program and taking that next step, what it looks like and what a win like that can do for it.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, I think it kind of does go back to you need to be able to sustain it a little bit. If they don't win another game this year, I think you lose a lot of the goodwill here. But at the same time, one of the reasons, and if you look back at the end of last season, they were really in a bad way. I mean, they had gone 2-10, lost 10 games in a row. People were looking at the schedule this season and going, what do you do with this? And they had all these new players, new coaches, and I feel like one of the big reasons that Vanderbilt was able to get to this point so quickly is the NIL discussion. They got a little more serious about that in terms of what they needed to do to keep up in the SEC. And I mean, that's really, I think when you look at college sports right now and you want to say, gosh, how are they doing this? The answer almost always is going to be NIL, because it's something that you have to do. And if you get serious about doing, you can get a lot better real quick. And certainly in the transfer portal, which is what Vanderbilt did. They brought in some awfully good players to replace the guys they lost. I feel like they were able to change the culture very, very quickly. If you're able to keep doing that and continue to keep up NIL wise, then Vanderbilt, there's everyone has always looked at Vanderbilt as, gosh, how are they going to keep up in terms of NIL? They don't support the program the way this and that. Vanderbilt has an alumni base with some money, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, I've never understood why Vanderbilt would be at a disadvantage in a city like Nashville with a lot of opportunities that wouldn't exist in, say, Starkville, Mississippi. So I've never understood that. I've always felt like if Vanderbilt really got serious about this, they could be a lot better than they are athletically. And while I don't think they're doing some of the things that your top programs are doing still, I feel like from the time I've been here the last 5 years, they have gotten a lot more serious. They've done a lot more work with their facilities. They've really stepped it up in NIL. I think Candace Lee deserves a lot of credit for that in terms of understanding what they weren't doing and what they needed to do to be more successful. As much of a pain as it is to go over there and deal with the construction and have to walk through mazes to get anywhere, I've always said I'm not going to complain about it because I was one of the people writing about how bad the facilities were and how they needed to upgrade it. Say, hey, that's what they're doing. So that's you can certainly see the progress, even as the construction, nobody likes dealing with it.
Can you get a real feel on a day like Saturday for what it's going to be like when it's done?
A little bit. It's I don't know, PK. I don't know if you've been out there. It's half done. One side of the suites on the as you're sitting in the press box, the suites on the left side are done, and it looks pretty good. They've got a big screen up there, and so if you're looking one direction, you're like, hey, looks pretty good, and they look in the other direction, it's not finished at all, and they're working on that side. It's just even after the game. From a media standpoint, you got to get to the interviews across the street. Well, that's not an easy thing to do right now to get across the street because they've torn up everything. So you got to walk through the back of the baseball stadium and do all it. You do get a sense. You have more of a sense this year than you've had, but no, it's not a finished product. And I think it will be nice once they get it done. But I tell you, they haven't really been in a hurry with it.
No doubt. Gentry, really great stuff as always. Appreciate your taking time to be with us. Enjoyed your coverage of this on Saturday night, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Enjoyed it. Good job being there.
Take care,
I felt you felt it coming. I felt you felt it coming.
That's right. No doubt. Rexrode did not. Tough one for old Joe.
Rexrode, really bad showing by Joe. Was he already in Florida?
He was.
Oh, God.
He left that day and ended up missing the game of the century at Vanderbilt.
It's really just I think we should lay off. It's just elder abuse.
615
gout abuse.
1025. Our phone number. We'll react to what Gentry had to say. Take more of your thoughts on Vanderbilt's upset against Alabama. Coming up next, Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, the game. Tune in to 93.3 FM Totally Hits Nashville this Thursday for MTSU football. Blue Raiders taking on Louisiana Tech on the road. Pregame at 5:30, kickoff at 7 o'clock. MTSU football coverage on 93.3 FM Totally Hits Nashville, presented by Sloan's Motorcycle ATV. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode. We are live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. So, PK, I got to ask, what were you doing on Saturday night? When did you see what was going on with Vanderbilt and Alabama? When they actually pulled it off and they took down Alabama, what went through your mind?
Holy bleep, holy bleep, holy bleep. That's generally my thought. I actually so what time did it end?
Right around, I don't know, 6:30, 6:45, somewhere in that neighborhood.
All right, the Yankees started right around 6:30.
Yep.
And as big as that was, my allegiance to the Yankees trumps all. And so I was flipping back and forth, and I didn't flip for the end. So I think Alabama was getting the ball back maybe for the last time. And I was thinking, well, this is going to be interesting. I flipped to the Yankees and kind of lost my place in it. When I flipped back, the interview was going on. I don't want to be critical of anything. I don't want to see the guy's family, all his boys jumping all over him and that. Like, his family, stay over there until he's done with the interview. And then it's just so funny. He also, like, I'm not being critical of this. I think this is funny, where he's praising God and all of that, and then the F-bombing.
F-bombs just start flying.
I
God gave me a vision. Bleep!
And we're bleeping turn. But then I stayed on it a while to watch, the scene there, and then I was flipping back as I guess it went to news, and we saw what was going on with the goalposts, and taking in the scene and kind of getting the vibe. I do think it's a kind of where were you at the moment, Nashville Sports Day. As we said, there haven't been that many of those moments. The tennis ball with Shinsis.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the Music City Miracle for sure. And that was, pre-social media.
Number one.
That's number one. Yeah. The, Preds punching their ticket to the Cup final at night. The place was going crazy. Like downtown was nuts.
Yeah. Downtown, the streets were.
It was just unbelievable.
On fire.
Yeah. Obviously the Cup final itself, but like there's not a ton. Like, the Titans going to the Super Bowl, that happened in Jacksonville when they punched their ticket for that. And like we talked about, there have not been.
Most people were watching at home or with friends.
And there haven't been a ton of home playoff successful games for the Titans to speak of in recent memory. So,
yeah.
And by haven't been a ton, there have been zero to speak of.
I think if you're going off the top of your head, Music City Miracle, Preds clinching their conference to go to the Stanley Cup, and this in the last 30 years would be the three moments.
Yeah. I would agree.
Middle beating Duke.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
fourth.
Yeah.
That was a big one.
That's a big one, but there's not been a ton to choose from. And you bring up the interesting question because, look, they've been the story in all of sports, certainly in college football over the weekend. Like it's been incredible. And they were all over the place yesterday, soaking it all in, and they should. Like Vanderbilt should lean as hard into that as they want to lean into it. I am interested to see now, like, what you do with it because, that program's needed something like this for a long time. They never approached anything like this. So now that you've done it, how do you build on it? Like, if you go out and lay an egg against Kentucky this weekend, does that cheapen it in any way? Like, I'm with Gentry from the standpoint of, like, you can't just go out there and lose every other game. It would be great to see them now, particularly get to a bowl game, get to 6 wins and turn it into something, some sort of postseason success that way. But I am interested to see, like, can you, for lack of a better term, like, can you handle the moment? Like, how do you move past this and make sure it's not just some one-off if you're Clark Lee?
Yeah, but I don't think you can cheapen it no matter what you do. Like, as a standalone moment,
Agree.
It's got all the merits in the world. but you need to build on it in terms of like show that you're mature and that you don't come out against Kentucky and have absolutely nothing and show that your gas tank is depleted and all of that. That would be immature. That would show that Lee couldn't convey the important things to his team or get through to them. But I think also on a parallel track going on at the same time, you're talking about transfer portal. You're talking about, the recruiting pitch now has a whole new element to it.
Yep.
Why would I come there? Well, you come here because you can be part of something like that. You come here because we're growing into a program that can do things like that on a more consistent and regular basis. You come here because our stadium is about to be finished and Nick Saban's talking crap about it, but it's gradually now going to turn from crimson to gold because people are coming expecting to see that.
Yeah.
And we're going to deliver that. I mean, the whole sales pitch is transformed to a degree. And I mean, there are a lot of areas where Clark Lee, the early faith in Clark Lee, maybe had cause to fade. But here's an area where he gets a lot of buyback.
No doubt. No, for sure. I mean, we were talking heading into the season. I mean, just the way their schedule set up. And this is before we ever saw Diego Pavia play it down for him. But before, when their schedule set up, it was setting up for 2 or 3 wins. Just on paper, looking at it, I think their over under win total heading into the year was 2.5. So, like that was the expectation. They've already passed that. And then when you get something like this, it totally resets where the bar is in the program. And like you said earlier in the show, they legitimately could be 5.
Yeah, it's also laced with some disappointment over 2 games that just can't. You can't lose to Georgia State.
No, the Georgia State one is inexplicable to me. And Missouri, they had right there on the ropes, and they should have won that game. And you miss a kick, and all of a sudden you end up on the wrong side of that. But I'm really interested to see where they go from here. John on the text line: can Vandy beat Tennessee this season, or was this a fluke? We talked about this a little bit yesterday. Vol's got a lot to work on with their passing game. It's broken right now. So, right now, I think they've got a shot. Now, I'd still pick Tennessee. I think once the game comes around, people are going to pick Tennessee to win that game.
But calling it a fluke, I mean, it was on this day, Vandy was better.
Yeah.
It's not a fluke in terms of like, I don't know. You can categorize it as a fluke in like, oh my goodness, look what Vandy did today. But you can't categorize it as a fluke in like
watching the game play out.
Right.
Yeah. It was 60 minutes of they had no answer for Vanderbilt's offense.
Yeah.
And there was nothing fluky about that.
Now, do other good teams, does Tennessee, who's a good team despite what their failures in Arkansas, which get overshadowed, by the way, they're getting a real pass because of what Vanderbilt did. But is Tennessee able to look at that tape of Vanderbilt executing their stuff very, very well and plan for it better because they've now seen it done very, very well? That's the chess game now. And can Vandy wrinkle off of it better and execute it even better? Those are the questions going forward. But there are going to be more eyes on Vanderbilt now.
No doubt.
To see that. I think a Vanderbilt-Tennessee game, that's a watcher.
There's a legitimate intrigue to it that I did not think would be there.
Yeah, Vanderbilt-Kentucky has a lot of intrigue to it now.
No doubt. 615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll get back into the Titans coming up next. Take more of your thoughts on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, the game.
What did the bye week process kind of look like for Jeff? I know he has the elbow that he's dealing with. How did you go about managing that?
Well, same as the rest of the guys that are, they get their treatment. They make sure they're taking care of what they got to take care of. And you try to let them still get a day or two out. And, you only get one of these over the course of 17 games. So take the rest when it's provided. And everything else seems good. He'll be working through that elbow injury this week, and we'll see where he stands, but hopeful that he's ready to roll.
For you, is that like, as you watch him, like, is that kind of like a pain tolerance? Is there concern that it could actually get worse, or how do you approach it?
It's really up to him. These guys know their bodies, and our training staff. I'm not the doctor on those things, and they rely on those opinions. And again, everything that we had prior to and at this point is that it needed a little bit of time to heal, and that they would be better in a week's time, be better in 2 weeks' time. And that was the genesis behind the decision to sit him on Monday night, is that he'd be able to, in really 2 weeks' time from the injury, would be a much better spot. So ultimately that's where we landed on it, because it would be in his best interest for longevity's case, to keep him out.
That's Brian Callahan on Jeffrey Simmons and the injury he's dealing with. We'll see what his status looks like on Sunday as the Titans prepare for the Indianapolis Colts. Taking your thoughts on the Titans, 615-737-1025. Big A had Mike Herndon on earlier. He brought up, we talked about the defense. If you go strictly by yardage per game, they're great. They're number one in the league. It's been awesome from that standpoint on the Titans. Now, you do factor in, the Chicago game where they did a great job against Caleb Williams. They held the offense as a whole to less than 150 yards. And then when you get the gift of playing against Tyler Huntley and that joke of an offense we saw from Miami on Monday night, that influences your numbers as well. Herndon brought up the lack of a pass rush. You're seeing it from Harold Landry. That's about it right now from the Tennessee Titans. I'm looking at just what they've got available to them with the roster. And if the answer is not coming from Jeffrey Simmons in terms of more pressures, and Herndon threw the stat out there, he's got 2 so far, which is nowhere near good enough. Now, he didn't play in one game. It's 2 in 3 games, but they need more from him than that. If it's not coming from Jeffrey Simmons, I don't really know where it's coming from, because, Arden Key, all due respect, I'm not sure you're getting a ton of pressures from him, not a ton of pressure on the quarterback. Landry needs help, and I wonder where it's coming from purely a pass rushing standpoint as the season goes along here.
Blitzes. It's got to come from blitzes. It's going to have to. I mean, it's not coming from remember how excited we were about Jalen Harrell?
Yeah.
I mean, remember how excited we were about James Williams? I mean,
should be a good reminder of preseason talk,
yes.
Just being exactly that.
I mean, the draft is about Latham and Sweat and Brownlee. And that's where you're getting your help this year. And the rest of it really is about long term. But that pass rush is going to be an issue. And I think it needs to come in the form of blitz help with Murray, with Ernest Jones, with defensive backs. Expected Jamal Adams to be involved there. Jamal Adams hardly plays.
Yep.
They haven't really found a role or a niche for him. This big nickel hasn't been a thing. Diggs is one of the defenders who's on the rise. I think has gotten progressively better. Maybe we'll see him involved a little bit in coming. I think the defense is good, not great. The takeaway thing is a problem. I've said this time and time again, and Ernest Jones said this very well, I think, after the third game. We play good defense when it's not that important, and when it's important, we don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's very self-aware, and it was very true. Miami game's a wash, but against the Jets, they gave up the game-winning drive at the crucial moments. The turnover thing's a big issue. They gave up those big conversions against Green Bay to Malik Willis, and a loss to a second-string quarterback there. So they're not without fault. They're not the big problem by any means, but they're not without fault. Simmons is talking about, I do my job, when this is a guy that you expect to go above and beyond, and now may be limited by this elbow. So they're not without concern by any means.
No doubt. And, Landry, the production's there. He's got 4 sacks in 4 games. So, I mean, he's on 17 sack pace. at the moment. But it's going to take more than that. And Herndon brings up the point, and I think it's a good one. If you're not affecting the quarterback, it's hard to expect those turnover numbers to get a lot better. I mean, the one turnover that they've forced on the defensive side of the ball right now has been the backward pass, right? So it wasn't really forced. It was a gift that you willingly accepted, which is great, but it's hard to get there. Now, they did have the safety that they forced too. So if you want to count that, then that's fine. But it's hard to imagine if you're not affecting the quarterback more than they are right now, where the turnovers are going to ultimately end up becoming from. Like you'd like to see, Snead come up with a couple or Hooker come up with a couple in the back end. But they are going to, especially when you move into like the Buffaloes and the Detroits of the world coming up here in a few weeks, it's hard to envision the Titans having a chance to win those games if you're not creating a couple of turnovers in those games. And it's the NFL, and crazier things have happened than the Titans sneaking up and beating either the Bills or the Lions. But in order to do that, you're going to have to find a way to create some more turnovers with way more regularity than what we're seeing right now.
And the other thing about these defensive numbers, which I don't have in front of me, is, it's nice to have them, but I do have the offensive numbers in front of me. They're 32nd in offense.
Correct.
31st in pass offense and 29th in rush offense. So, when you're so heavily slanted on one side of the ball, so bad, it's somewhat natural that the other side is good. It's like when you're the number one pass offense in the league, your run offense isn't that good. Not because great. It doesn't need to be. So right. Those things counterbalance.
No doubt. And then on the offensive side, we've talked about this. I mean, there's a lot to fix and to improve upon as the season continues on here. Levis with the injury he's dealing with. First off, we'll see what that looks like throughout the week. But your expectation is that he'll be fine on Sunday against Indianapolis. Yeah. So what does that look like? Is there noticeable improvement in the drop back passing game as they move ahead here? And we kind of went through the layers of that a little bit earlier and what that could look like. But if you don't start to see that soon, then that becomes really concerning to me. And Brian Callahan, I don't have any grand sweeping takeaways of Callahan as a play caller yet or anything like that. Like, I think it's much too early to really have those at this point, but I am interested to see how he adjusts after the bye week to try to generate some of these plays with the offense that just for the most part haven't been there. Like the most explosive plays this year, there have been a couple of times that Pollard has gotten loose in the running game. You had the one play down the field that the ball kind of fit in between the Ridley and the Jets game. Other than that, there's not much to speak of when it comes to explosive plays with this offense.
Not enough. And need to go back and look at the phrasing that Callahan used, but I think it was in the preseason. It might have been in the spring or even before that, but he said there's scheme for everything, basically. Remember that?
Yep.
Well, if there's scheme for everything, we're not seeing it.
Right.
And I think he's referring to that when he's saying he's not doing enough. But if there's scheme for everything, they got to get to it. Because, they're averaging 20, they're 20th in points. And that 30 game is a nice outbreak, though it came unnaturally.
It did.
I think most of us would say.
Yes.
But if you're betting on what they're going to score on a weekly basis, you're still picking 17.
Correct.
Right?
That's the magic number.
And it needs to be more than that. So here's hoping that that 30 helps them do something differently. But you're going to need to drive. You're going to need to get in the red zone, not kick field goals from outside it. And you're going to need to find touchdowns.
One guy in particular that I think could be a big part of that moving forward, I want to ask you about coming up next. We'll do that. 615-737-1025, our phone number. More of your thoughts on the Titans coming up. Join Jared Stillman, Chris Sanders, and Derek Mason at John Bon Jovi's Nashville this Sunday for the pregame show from 9:30 to 11:30. They'll break down the Titans' Week 6 matchup against the Colts, give you the latest updates before the game. Pregame show presented by Parman Tractor and Equipment, Sundeck Nashville, Sloan's Motorcycle ATV, and award-winning Blue Note Juke Joint and Blue Note Crossroads Bourbon. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Paul Kuharski, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning, taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines, which are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 19 targets, 9 catches for Calvin Ridley through 4 games. 9 catches for 141 yards, 1 touchdown, which means, if I can do some quick math,
I think it's
real
2
quick,
and a quarter.
Yeah,
a
2 and a
game.
quarter a game. And you're talking about a guy that is now on pace for 599 yards that you're paying $23 million to. Obviously, they got to find a way to get him going. How much of it is on him? How much of it is on the protection, the quarterback? I don't know. But I know this, 9 catches for 141 yards and a touchdown through 4 games for Calvin Ridley is not acceptable. That's of the offensive things that they got to get figured out. Getting Ridley the ball and getting him involved and him forcing his way into that has got to be near the top of that list as they get things going again on Sunday.
I just think it sounds too simple sometimes, and force it. Yeah. Call plays where he is primary more often, and force it that way. Also, I cite this all the time. Steve McNair had trouble getting going early a lot. You could tell if he was on or off early a lot. His number one guy was Wycheck in terms of getting things going. And they simply called stuff early for him to get some completions and get in the flow of the game, throwing the Wycheck early.
Yep.
Now, I don't know if it's Ridley early, but I think they've got to find something for Levis early to get him into a rhythm. That could be Pollard. It could be a mix of guys. It could be a certain kind of play. But and I think the scripted stuff's been reasonably good. But I think getting him an early confidence rhythm is good. In terms of Ridley, I think there should be, 3 passes a quarter where he's primary, and you feel really good about the plays. These are 3 really good Ridley plays that we're calling on first or second down in high on our list.
Yeah.
And you just have to do it over and over and over. And you can't be surprised at the end of the game to say, oh, we only tried Ridley 2.25 times.
He's got 6 targets in the last 2 weeks, 2 catches for 14 yards. I mean, now, granted, I understand in the Miami game that it became pretty clear early in the game that offense that Miami had wasn't going to be able to do anything. And they ran the ball a lot, and they were trying to run the clock. I get all that. But
even
3
then,
targets.
Even then, you'd say, all right, well, we're going to run the ball a whole bunch. But on top of running the ball a whole bunch, we're going to get the ball in the hands of our big playmaker, who's Calvin Ridley. Because they're going to be paying attention to the run a lot. And there should be some stuff we're able to do, scheme for everything.
Yep.
Well, what's our scheme for when we're running a ton and we want to get the ball in the hands of our most dangerous guy?
Right. And look, the first couple weeks wasn't great from him by any stretch of the imagination, but it felt like they had something there. Like, week 1, 3 catches, 50 yards. Week 2, 4 catches, 77 yards. You had the touchdown. Obviously, they handed the ball to him as well. So that they were finding ways to get him the ball. And it feels like for whatever reason, he got shut down in the Green Bay game. It does feel like Hopkins is starting to get going a little bit just based on the way he's moving out there. Like the knee doesn't look like it's an issue with him anymore. But the idea is to get them both going at the same time. And they've, for whatever reason, they just have not come close to finding that. And is this the week it's going to happen? I don't know. It needs to be part of it. I mean, certainly the Titans need to run the ball this weekend against Indianapolis. You should have success running the football. But built into that needs to be what you're saying of finding ways to get this guy the football and generate. Like when you think explosive plays, Pollard can be a part of that for sure. Number one guy I think of when I think explosive plays in this offense is Ridley, right? And It just hasn't been that so far.
And when you have success running the football, I mean, if they have success running the football against Indianapolis, which I think we all expect because Indianapolis has been susceptible to the run, then play action is built into that.
Yep.
I mean, that was the whole Tannehill-Henry offense. And so that opens you up. I mean, the Tannehill offense had a ton of big plays.
Yep.
Was built for big plays out of these very situations. So let's see some of that out of similar circumstances.
I got a text that says, after letting Vrabel and Henry go, the Titans are a team with no elite players, one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, and a rookie coach who is in way over his head. How can this get any better? Finally, we got a coach from another team with 1 win so far. I think it's, I don't know that it's fair to say that Callahan is in over his head at this point. We're talking about a 4-game sample size.
I mean, how can this get any better? Things get better over time when you have new people. I think it's a little bit unreasonable to put a final verdict on a quarter of a season. Has it been good so far? No. But how can it get any better? I mean, you've seen Titans teams start poorly before and end up better. And look, I'm a Vrabel defender. I don't think he should have been fired, but he wasn't lighting the world on fire the last 2 seasons. He had bad rosters, and I think that was the root of things. But was it getting better at the end of last year?
No. No doubt.
So you're applying a double standard there.
Yeah, Callahan, I'm totally with you in terms of, like, I've expected more from a scheming standpoint, from a play calling standpoint, than we've gotten to this point. I'm interested to see how that changes after the bye week and what that looks like. And part of me also, PK, just wonders with the offense, how much of it is just the quarterback is extremely limiting of what they can do right now. Like, he was turning the ball over, obviously. Herndon brought up some of the luck that goes into that. They have lost every fumble that he's fumbled, which is kind of amazing. But, like, how much is it just he's not seeing the game at a high enough level right now where they can't do some of the things that they want to do offensively? I don't know.
Yeah,
I hope you figure that out moving forward.
As we talk scheme, I probably, in what I've said, they're not factored that in enough, limited by the quarterback. But then you flip that on its head, and like we're saying last year, they were finding plays downfield with what he could do. So he's limiting what they can do in what they want to do, but it seems they're limiting what he can do and what he's good at.
Right.
So that circle is confusing.
How do you break it? Yeah, you got to find a way to get out of that. The Ridley part of this, obviously that's priority 1 in the passing game, that connection. And that goes back to, specifically the deep ball in camp. They couldn't get on the same page. Right now it's everything. Like 19 target. When you're targeting a guy and you've been unable to, and I know he's had a couple drops in there too, which would change the numbers. But 9 catches on 19 targets is not a good enough hit rate for that guy.
Oh,
you got to figure it out.
Hit rate.
It's awful. And you got to, whatever it takes to fix that, that's got to be priority 1 in the passing game in terms of the concepts you're calling, whatever it is that you've got to get figured out from Callahan that way. That has to get dramatically better.
Yeah, there need to be more. I want to see more good throws from Levis. Now, there are a couple dropbacks in the game where he's, unbothered.
Yeah.
So where's the great throw from Levis? Where's the great route from Ridley?
Yep.
Let's see that happen.
PK, great stuff. We'll be back at it tomorrow.
Been a pleasure. I look forward to the early alarm tomorrow. Don't block the box. Be sure to lock your locks.
Jason Big Joe is coming up next. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3 The Game.